Hey guys, so I'm trying this, never done this before. I used to write Sacred Spaces. I used to write it once a week, and I got to 600 and I kind of just wanted to stop. I thought there's just too much noise, like everyone's writing about stuff. You just go online, it's just a lot of noise. So I kind of just want to have a break from it, and then I just want to do some other writing, and then I kind of thought, well, maybe, or a friend of mine said, maybe one day you should do a podcast. So I was like, I could probably do a podcast. But then I had this idea of just doing these little Sacred Spaces videos. So this is Sacred Spaces video number one. Um, and weirdly, I wanted to do this maybe like a month ago, but I was just kind of thinking about it and never really committed to the idea. But now, with this whole COVID-19 thing, and we're stuck in our houses, and the world's kind of slowed down, had to slow down, um, we I just thought, well, um, let me start this video and share some thoughts. So, ironically, not ironically, the topic I wanted to talk about a month ago was Mind the Gap, and I'm still going to talk about it because I think it kind of relates to today's, the things that are going on at the moment. If you see me looking to the left, it's just because I'm looking at what I wrote down, so I keep track of what I'm saying. Um, so that being said, this whole mind the gap thing. If you live in the UK or you've been to the UK, been to London, especially the underground, mind the gap is the phrase that's printed by the tracks. Obviously, telling you mind the gap so you don't fall in the gap and get killed by a train. But the phrase mind the gap is an interesting phrase because it's obviously saying mind the gap, meaning pay attention to the gap. And then I kind of thought of our own lives. We have gaps and we need to pay attention to those gaps in our lives. And I wondered what gaps you would have in your life. And I was thinking, well, a few suggestions maybe of gaps is if you catch public transport here, you often will have a gap. If you're on a bus or a train, or you're waiting for a bus, you will have a gap. And what do you do with that gap? Or perhaps you're in the shops and the line's a bit long, or famous post office everywhere, all over the world. I know in South Africa it's long. Here in the UK, the post office line can be quite long. Or you're in a doctor's room, in a waiting room, waiting. There's a lot of gaps in your life. What do you do with those gaps? And sometimes people have the ability just to sit and they quite enjoy it. Other people get irritated and frustrated and impatient. Oh, flip, I have to wait in this queue again. Maybe there's something good we can do with that gap. And I was thinking the other day, I get to ride to work sometimes, and that's a 20-minute cycle, maybe just over 20 minutes. And when I ride, it's a really beautiful ride. And sometimes I have like one earpiece and I will listen to some music, and it's quite a cool way of starting the day on the way to work. But then other days I feel convicted not to listen to music and to just listen to nature, just listen to the sounds of the world around me as I cycle to work. And I think it's a good illustration for me to share with you is sometimes we have gaps, and what do we fill those gaps with? Even sometimes I'm on a bus or I love trains in this country, and I love seeing the train reading, and reading is not a bad filler of a gap, but sometimes maybe reading is not the thing I need to do, even though it's a good thing because reading's never bad. But maybe in that gap we need to just be still and kind of pray aloud with God, talk to God, listen to God, notice things around us, or maybe it's even time to connect, have a conversation with someone you haven't checked in with for a while, or someone that needs a listening ear, or just someone you need to drop in and say, hey, what's up, and kind of just check in with them. So what do we do with the gaps we have in our lives? Well, we should probably use them to connect more with God, connect with one another. Maybe, so the gaps, I'm saying, mind the gaps, paying attention to gaps. Let's be less selfish with those gaps, because obviously it's cool to read. Now with this whole COVID-19 coronavirus thing, people are like, wow, cool, binge watching, I can watch so much TV. Is that a productive use of the time? The gap that you have, we're enforced with this gap, this massive gap. But are we going to use it to just do frivolous things, waste time, or could we use it in a far more productive way? So two scriptures I want to share before ending this is, first of all, Psalm 46 verses 10. It's quoted quite a lot. be still and know that I am God. In your gaps, the gaps that you have in your daily life, could you be still and be still to listen and know that God is God, and kind of shut out the noises and tune into one noise, tune into the sound of God and listen to what he's saying. I like this illustration, or this interview that Mother Teresa had a few years ago. She apparently was interviewed and asked by the interviewer, so when you have a quiet time with God, what do you do? And she says, well, I just sit and listen. So the interviewer said, oh, cool, okay, so what does God say? Hoping to kind of catch her out. And then Mother Teresa replies, well, he just listens. And I kind of just like that imagery of God and us just sitting together listening. Maybe we should do that more often in those gaps that we have. And then you'll know the story of Jesus wandering the desert for 40 days before he starts his ministry. He's in the desert 40 days. And or maybe with this whole self-isolation, social distancing at the moment, it is an isolation. It's a desert period. And everyone looks at the desert experience of Jesus as, whoa, imagine 40 days in the desert being tempted. It would be pretty scary and tough. It would be. I'm going to turn this so you can see I'm also a Chelsea fan, not just a Lille fan. A Chelsea fan. Anyway, so Jesus in the desert for 40 days. I could imagine the first few days actually being pretty incredible. He gets to lie on his back, look up at the stars, and just get to be with God the Father before he's going to do these 3 years of incredible ministry, preaching, teaching, healing people, doing miracles, before he's like on demand for 3 years of his life, and then he leads to his death. Before that stuff happens, he gets to be with God and just listen and look. Imagine just looking up at the stars and just taking it in, no agenda, no rush. And maybe in this desert period, in the gap that we have, might be 40 days. We don't know. It might, or maybe be longer. There's some speculation. Is to tune in and focus and say, God, I've got 40 days. How can I use it productively? I'm not just going to binge watch. I'm not just going to read endlessly. I'm going to use time wisely. How can I be creative? How can I help? How can I offer to the world? So yeah, that's my first Sacred Spaces. Mind the gap in your life. Pay attention to the gaps and use them wisely. Thank you for listening or watching. Over and out.